Easily the most controversial part of our last tier list video was the Spitfire, where we rated it an F tier. I've spent many hours today playing off stream, just solo by myself, solo queuing, and ramming my head against the Spitfire, trying to see if I was wrong, if there's more I need to learn about the gun, if there's things we need to update about it, and, well, I figured we'd make a video. Let's go into the depth of all the things that I've learned, and we will also make a more nuanced argument for why I rated it where I did, and any potential changes I may see in the future. So, let's have a look. As a personal note, I'd like to remind everyone that the tier definitions of the last video did not necessarily state that an F tier weapon was worse than a D tier weapon. They're pretty much in the same category, in the same bucket, but D tier weapons are intended to be that weak, whereas F tier weapons probably are not intended to be that weak and use that infrequently and probably should be brought up in some way. That was more the delineation, and I think maybe I didn't communicate that clearly enough, so that is kind of where that goes, and I want to make sure that that's at least clearly stated now, after the fact. So, in a realistic standpoint, this weapon's performance sits low C tier, high D tier, I mean, in my opinion, but with everyone else, maybe on the console metagame things are different, and if it makes everyone happier for me to put the letter C on it instead of the letter D, if that's the biggest complaint everyone has, then sure, fine, we'll put a C on it, that's okay. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but the core of my argument still remains, is that I didn't think the weapon was that great compared to everything else that you could be taking instead. So let's first break down the Spitfire's stats, and then we will go ahead and talk a little bit more subjectively about it, but for now, let's just do the objective. Versus a standard target, the Spitfire deals 18 damage per body shot, 36 per headshot, and 13.5 per leg shot. Your rate of fire is 540 rounds per minute, giving us a damage per second of 162. This DPS value is worse than all fully automatic weapons in the game, except the Alternator and RE45. These guns sit at 150 and 143 DPS respectively. Your time to kill versus no armor is 0.56 seconds. Versus levels 1 through 4 armor, your times to kill sit at 0.89, 1.0, 1.22, and 1.33 seconds each. Now let's compare this to the closest heavy ammo weapon to the Spitfire, the Flatline. This weapon has a DPS of 190. Its TTK values versus the same armor spread as before sit at half a second, 0.7 seconds, 0.9, 1, and 1.1. So, versus no armor, if we compare the Spitfire to the Flatline, you're looking at a 60 millisecond difference. Not too bad. This almost certainly doesn't matter outside of super high level play. They're mostly equivalent, so we'll give it the pass here. Versus level 1 armor, you're looking at a 190 millisecond time to kill difference. Ouch. Anecdotally, lots of players complain about lag in games before they even hit 100 milliseconds of ping to the server. Doubling that value before ping to the server is even factored in is, in my opinion, a complete deal breaker. Versus level 2 armor, we split the difference and drop to a 100 millisecond difference in time to kill between these two guns. This is well within the gray area of what is or is not okay, and it's ultimately the user's choice if they have the preference between these two guns, so we'll err on the side of caution and give the Spitfire the pass here as well. However, once we get to level 3 and level 4 armor, the differences here are stark. There's a 220 millisecond difference at level 3, and 230 milliseconds of difference at level 4. Almost a quarter of a second. In a competitive FPS like this, that's a lifetime. So across the board, it'll take you longer to kill targets with the Spitfire than just about any other full auto in the game. Couple that with the fact that your movement speed while aiming down sights is less than half of what you'd have while aiming down sights with a pistol or SMG, and those two lower DPS weapons are starting to look a whole lot more attractive. Now, let's play devil's advocate here and give the Spitfire a best case scenario. We'll put the big monster of a machine gun up against the pocket machine pistol. The Spitfire has over 100 milliseconds of advantage across all armor tiers, getting as much as a 200 millisecond advantage against red armor. So with a loosey-goosey margin of error, the Spitfire is about the same amount stronger than the RE45 as it is weaker than the Flatline. That difference between the guns is roughly the same. So from a pure damage perspective, the Spitfire is a clear winner against the RE45 and the Alternator, but what do you trade for that increased damage? Well, mobility and handling. Of course, this is pretty obvious when you're looking at a big honkin' machine gun versus a tiny pocket pistol. At base, when walking and not sprinting while holding a weapon of any kind, you move at 173.5 UPS, or units per second. This is the unit of measurement of speed in the Apex Legends game engine. When aiming down sights with the RE45, you move at 95% of this speed, which comes out to 164.82 UPS. This is a small enough difference that you likely wouldn't even notice it at all. Now, when aiming down sights with the Spitfire, you move at 40% of your base speed, which comes out to 69.4 UPS. I'd say nice, but quite frankly, we're pretty far from it. When using the gun, you'll feel this. When watching someone else aiming down sights with the Spitfire and AD strafing, you'll notice. I feel like everyone would agree with the fact that a slower moving target is generally one that's easier to hit, right? Somebody moving at 40% of their base walk speed is about as easy of a target as you can get in this game, unless you're looking at maybe someone standing still or using a sniper rifle aimed down sights, but doesn't get much easier than that. If you were to play against a mouse and keyboard using, AD strafing, crouch spamming Wraith, which one would you rather shoot at? The one with the Spitfire or the one with the RE45? Which one do you think would be easier to hit? Is that difference of 19 DPS between these guns worth the very real chance that you're going to die faster as a result of aiming the Spitfire? In my opinion, the answer is a no. In a world where you can choose between either weapon, with everything else being equivalent in terms of ammo availability, attachment availability, yada yada yada, I would recommend the RE45 most of the time. This isn't even to mention the faster ADS speed, draw, and holster times of the RE45, but that should go without saying, right? However, if you're in a situation where you know that you're going to be fighting between 30 to 75 meters or so, then of course, you should probably go for the Spitfire instead for the much better overall ranged performance. Just be careful with your positioning. Next, let's jump back to the Flatline versus the Spitfire. Not only does the Flatline have better TTK and better DPS, but it also has better handling characteristics and a faster ADS time, a faster draw and holster, and a coveted faster walk speed while aimed down sights. Granted, 86.75 UPS is what you're going to be walking at with this gun, which is 50% of the base gun walking speed, and it's barely a difference between the Spitfire, but still, it's an improvement, and it's something, and it is a box that we can check, saying that the Flatline is technically better than the Spitfire in this way. Subjectively, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think aiming at someone who is aiming back at you with either a Spitfire or Flatline is mostly the same. You're not really going to notice a difference. I mean, in your actual stats, you may have a couple percentage points less accuracy against someone using a Flatline, but I don't think it's something the vast majority of people would actually feel or notice. Also subjectively, I think the Flatline has got much better iron sights than the Spitfire to boot, though the Flatline in general is not stupendous on that front either. Finally, let's touch on the recoil patterns of these guns. Simply put, for the first handful of bullets, they both recoil up and to the left. After that point, they start snaking almost entirely left and right without too much upwards recoil, especially on the Spitfire. After a few minutes of practice with both of these guns against stationary targets, I found the Spitfire technically easier to control at full auto, both at ranges of around 45 meters and 75 meters. This conflicts with my prior bias, so I will concede that point. The Spitfire can oftentimes be easier to control from a recoil control standpoint. This was, however, performed with a purple barrel, so mileage will certainly vary when using a lesser barrel attachment. Once people start AD strafing a lot, then this mostly goes out the window. So it's not the most scientific of tests. It's going to entirely it's going to entirely rely upon your ability to control that recoil and deal with AD strafing. So I can't make a super scientific or convincing argument on this point, but this is just what I experienced in my short time testing. So the point I'm trying to make here is this. The Spitfire is not without merit. It's not like it's never good, it's not like it's never useful, and it's not outclassed all the time, but there's a lot of guns in this game that will have similar to better performance at most of the ranges the Spitfire is used, while having at least one area that they're significantly better. R301, R99, Prowler Auto, and Wingman all come to mind for most situations. Furthermore, if you're full auto spraying people with a Spitfire from 75 meters, you don't need maximum DPS and would still get good damage from tap firing most other full auto guns. In addition to that, you're going to be way more ammo efficient with a gun that is not called the Spitfire in those situations as well, more often than not. In my opinion, the trade-off of having the potential for solid full auto accuracy at long range, not worth the overall bottom tier DPS, TTK, and ADS walk speeds for when fights get a little more intimate. To briefly touch on one of the most common comments I see on YouTube lately where people say, "But Frothy, I kill whole teams 1v3 with this thing all the time because it has so many bullets in magazine.
I could beat their entire team 1-on-8 with no monitor."
All I can say is this. Good for you. Relish in the fact that you're playing against opponents that are so far below your skill level or just so poorly positioned that they're letting you laser them down one at a time with one of the slowest killing guns in the game. Because if you match up with a Masters squad on PC, they're going to roll you. They're not going to let you do that. In conclusion, your fun is not wrong. If you like the Spitfire and it makes you happy, then by all means continue using it. But stating that the Spitfire is objectively better than most of the other guns in the game, in my opinion, is wrong. This gun is, in my opinion, underpowered and not worth taking if you can freely grab a top-tier gun, but if you're forced to take it because it's all you've got, it's certainly good enough to do work with if you can play to its strengths. This gun definitely has some, and you can make it look fantastic, but it requires very careful setup and positioning to properly employ. The Spitfire necessitates avoiding taking straight-up 1v1 gun duels with people whenever possible, and instead shines when used to punish others that are lackadaisically aiming down sights with their assault rifle, LMG, or sniper. Anyways, everyone, that'll just about do it for today's video. Thank you all so much for coming to watch. I hope you learned something new, and I hope that this was somewhat educational, or if nothing else, entertaining to you. Thank you all for being here. I will have plenty more coming for you very soon. I am very, very deep in working on a new character tier list, or excuse me, legend tier list, I should say. This is coming along very nicely. I'm just needing to record some more footage. I hopefully should have it out by next weekend if all things go according to plan. If you all have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below, and I hope to see you in a future video or stream sometime very soon. Take care.